This election really divided people, even families. This is a good indication of that. CNN caught up with a couple in line to vote in Pennsylvania who, when it came to politics, seemed to have irreconcilable differences.
Why are you voting for Donald Trump?
Because he's the best there is right now. Come on, we need somebody strong. We need our country that can be our country again and not be owing all the other countries.
Aren't you excited for the first female president?
No.
I am.
Someone slept on the couch last night. I'm just not sure who.
And President Obama called Donald Trump last night to congratulate him and even invited him to the White House for a meeting tomorrow. Of course, it was hard to understand Obama because at the time he was chewing 80 pieces of Nicorette. And he's like, yeah, just come by. I'm looking forward to it.
Voters in Arizona, Colorado, Maine, and Washington approved increases to minimum wage rates to at least $12 an hour by 2020, which is good news for all those pollsters who will now be working at Burger King.
Actually, I read that the polls may have been off because the shift to cell phones made it harder to collect data from people. Then Hillary said, they seem to have a pretty easy time collecting data from my phone.
Headlines and punchlines. You may wonder, was I doing a ventriloquist thing with Jimmy Kimmel? No, it's just that our director thinks I'm the biggest joke going. So I don't know. Headlines and punchlines from last night's late night shows. As we continue here on America Talks Live, we invite you to join our conversation at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. Joining me right here on the anchor desk, the host of Conversations with Nancy Brinker. Why? It's Ambassador Nancy Brinker. And on the far end of the anchor desk, my old pal Glen Downs, former chief of staff to Congressman Walter B. Jones Jr. of North Carolina. Tell you what, gang, let's go right to the phones, and we will begin in Garden City, Idaho. That is where Jeff joins us from. Hiya, Jeff. Welcome to the program.
Hey, hello. How are you doing?
Fine, thanks.
Oh, yeah, I just want to say, JD, you've done a great job. You've been a great champion for the cause, and I'm so excited for a Trump victory. I think the evangelicals, Pat Boone was on Newsmax earlier, saying that prayers and the moral majority pushed him over the top, and I do think so. And also, I'd like to say that, from what you were talking about just earlier, that we've had big fights in this country. Every time I'm a boxing fan, we have fighters fighting as hard as they can, pre-fight hype, Super Bowl champions fighting hard on the field, and always embracing each other at the end of the game. That's the American spirit, and that's the way it should be.
And Jeff, I think you give voice to some laudable goals and aspirations. One is testimony for the power of prayer. Also, there is testimony for the power of reconciliation. Nancy Brinker, from the diplomatic corps, from protocol. This transition that goes on, we tend to take it for granted, but it is the peaceful transition of power, the emphasis on peaceful.
It is, and things can go really smoothly or they can be very difficult, and they should go really smoothly because this period of time, this 60, 70 days before the new president is sworn in, is critical in setting up the path forward. And if you don't, as you know, if you don't get things done in the first 100 days, it's really hard to get things done.
Glen Downs, in our youth, you were an outspoken champion for Ronald Reagan.
Right. Yeah.
And when Mr. Reagan was elected, perhaps nothing so became Jimmy Carter as the way he transitioned out of office. We remember Jack Watson and the guys, Jody Powell, the guys on the Carter staff really worked hard with the Reagan people. President Obama promises the same thing. Do you expect that Mr. Obama's transition will be as effective as Mr. Carter's, or perhaps even as Mr. Obama was talking about President George W. Bush?
We'll see. You know, obviously, that was a different era, and we would hope that that tradition would be carried on. But you might remember that as the Clintons transitioned out of the White House, all the staff was not cooperative, and there was actually property stolen, things vandalized, vulgar notes left, that kind of thing. Hopefully that won't happen this time, but we saw last night in the streets of many major cities some organized protests that did not, in my opinion, come across as being particularly spontaneous, and they seem to have some direction from Mr. Soros and perhaps others. So we'll see how peaceful and how orderly and how much of a chance people are going to give democracy.
We are seeing pictures from last night. The city of big shoulders, Chicago, also the city of Democrat bosses like Rahm Emanuel. But this was led by MoveOn.org that doesn't appear ready to move on to the transition to Donald Trump right out there outside.
And the same organization that always, the same organization that always goes overseas telling other countries that they should have peaceful transitions and democracies.
Yeah, but again, when it's George Soros and all the money on the left, it's just about all the unrest a mega billionaire can pay for. Something that is priceless. The phone call we're going to take next from one of my old Arizona buddies from Buckeye, Arizona. Rick is on the line. Rick, who is in your rhetorical bullseye this morning in Buckeye?
I'll tell you, things are great here in Arizona, JD. I wish you were here. God's been good. We had a great time on Tuesday. My wife and I, we were at the polls 16 and a half hours. We opened it up, and just the enthusiasm that was for Trump, and you could just see it trickling down. And we were with Joe Pyle and Ben Carson on Saturday at the Republican headquarters and had a good time with them. And by the way, Joe wanted me to tell you, he says, you be sure next time you talk to JD, you tell him I said hi, because I'll tell you, this man thinks the world of you, JD.
Well, Joe Arpaio, I think the world of him, and we were talking earlier about George Soros. Sorry to say, Rick, of course, Joe lost because Soros put in at least $2 million against Joe Arpaio that we know of. But Joe Arpaio's name, you know, it's interesting. We were talking about Jeff Sessions. I don't know if Jeff wants to leave the Senate, but Joe Arpaio, as one of the guys who's been guts up on the border, maybe he'll end up at Homeland Security. Tell you what, let's take a look at some of the other names. It's time to get back in the mode of the great mentioner. Continuing from Brother Gizzy's list, Betsy McCoy, quite possibly at Health and Human Services. Larry Kudlow chairing the Council of Economic Advisors. Wouldn't this be interesting? Our friend Laura Ingraham as the press secretary. Rick Perry taking over at Agriculture. Now this would really be a pick. Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as chief of staff, and Joe Schmitz as White House counsel. Again, it's kind of a cottage industry now, if not a sport, Glen Down, since we both played high school football against each other, you know, and all the recruiting speculation, who was going where. Right. There's a little bit of this in the talk about transitioning and looking at different names for different jobs.
Yeah, usually the people that know aren't talking, and the people that are talking don't know. So we'll see. This is pretty early in this game. But what I find interesting is the talk of a son-in-law, a family member as a White House chief of staff, and you did see some pretty prominent family involvement in a significant way, in a very significant way in the campaign, but of the Trump family and his kids and kids' spouses. So this would be almost a Kennedy-esque kind of move in a way.
Yeah, don't you think that it could be that he also would ask his kids, who are just such great, ambassadors? They could be in a number of areas of the country and be great ambassadors for their father.
Well, the challenge, I think, is the fact that Mr. Trump has so many high-profile enterprises and businesses that the kids literally have to stick to business. Mm-hmm. He legally has to put this, if not in a blind trust, then in a family trust. Right. And we know the stories now, courtesy of Michael Beschloss and ironically other historians on the left. We have access to Lyndon Johnson's tapes. Mm-hmm. And, you know, LBJ, especially in broadcasting, he'd say, those aren't my stations, they belong to my wife. But I believe every Thursday, the general manager of KLBJ TV in Austin would have to come up for lunch with Lyndon, and Lyndon would be sitting there with, now aren't we getting more for this Cronkite show? We're a CBS affiliate, he gives me grief. We ought to be getting more money in our local spots. I don't think Trump is going to follow that LBJ model, Nancy.
No, I think that, you're right, but he's got very talented kids, but you know, it could be that he has one of them go to be an ambassador, and the next 2 years another one or another two go and say, I just think it's such a great opportunity because all of them are so intelligent, well-liked, well-spoken, well-educated, and a real honest and eager desire to be absolutely loyal to the president.
Well, we have a call for our final minute here to Georgia. I believe Keith is on the line. Keith, we got about a minute. Make it count, sir.
Yes, I am an African American, and I'm proud to say that I voted for Trump. And I'm just excited. Me and my wife both voted for him. He will push forward where we need to go outside of the division that Hillary Clinton and all of those on the far left have pushed. He is not a racist. He is not a divider. He's a wise man, and we've been with him from the beginning.
And Keith,
just wanted to say that.
We appreciate the phone call, and that is one of the big stories of this election. Those from the minority community stepping up to vote for Trump, and Keith very eloquently offering his testimony as to why he voted for Trump. We very much appreciate your eloquent and elegant analysis, Ambassador Nancy Brinker and former Congressional Chief of Staff Glen Downs. Now, when we come back, Matt Towery, the old pollster and columnist, talking about what he saw a long time ago that other folks didn't. It's America Talks Live.